Hi, this is JJ at CCBC. In this video we'll look at the subselection tool in Flash. Major topics we'll cover are the subselection tool itself, vector points and vector paths, as well as the Bezier curve. The software I'm using for this video is Adobe Flash Creative Suite version 6 on a Mac. So let's take a look at this. Here I have a Flash file already open and two vector shapes to work with. Now up to this point we've talked about the stroke and fill of our vector shapes. Now the stroke and fill are visual properties of our shapes. Both of these shapes have a stroke that is 8 pixels wide, solid black line. I can change the color, the thickness, or even the line style. That's just a visual change. The fill is the purple or the peach interior color of these two shapes. Now what I want to talk about are the points and paths that define this shape. Okay, so the stroke and fill are the visual properties, the points and paths are the structural properties of our shapes. It's kind of like a blueprint for the shape. So in order to work with the points and paths, I have to switch to the subselection tool. So that's the white arrow here at the top of our toolbar. So I'll switch to subselection, and I'm going to click on the outline of my rectangle. And now we can see the points and paths that define this shape. Now it's kind of hard to see, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Let's go to 200%. And now you can see a little bit better. Here are the 4 points, the corners, that define this shape. And the paths are the lines or the sides between those points. Okay. Now I call these angled points because there's a straight line going in and a straight line coming out of this point. So it creates a solid angle. Whereas if we look at the points and paths of this circle, these are curved points, right? The lines going into, or the paths going into and coming out of the point, are curved, so this is a curved point as well to define those pathways. So let's go back to our rectangle for a second. Now I can't directly manipulate the pathways. The way that we manipulate paths is by moving points. When we move a point, it redraws the path to wherever the point has been moved to. So I'll grab this side and move my point up here. And I'll grab this side, move my point down here, and you'll notice I've now created a new shape. The points have been moved, and the paths between those points have all been redrawn based on the new positions of my points. Right? So this is how you can manipulate a vector shape on the sub-object level, is by working with points and paths. In my circle, it's the same concept, but because I'm not working with angled points, I'm working with curved points, a new element introduces itself. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see this element better. I'm going to center this on my screen. And if I select this top point, you notice I have these new anchors appear. This is called a Bezier curve, and these are the Bezier anchors that allow me to control the curve or the path that goes through this point. Alright, so if I grab the end point of one of my anchors and I move it, you'll notice the anchors are linked together, and what they allow me to do is change the angle of the path going through that point. So as the angle increases on one side of the point, it decreases on the other side of the point because these are linked together. I'm going to return it to normal. Actually, let's twist it and see what happens. Another way that I can manipulate this point is I can increase or decrease the amplitude of the curve. So if I again grab my Bezier anchor on this side and I move it further out, you notice the pathway on this side is increasing in amplitude on that curvature. If I bring it further in, it decreases the amplitude of that curve. And same thing happens on the other side. So if I grab this point, I can increase or decrease the amplitude of that curve. So I'm going to return it to, whoops, missed it. I'm going to return it to pretty close to its original position. And show you one more thing that you can do with the Bezier anchors. Sometimes you want to break them. In other words, when I move one, it manipulates the other. Right? They influence one another because they're currently attached. Sometimes you want to break their influence so they're not controlling both sides with both anchors. So if I grab one anchor and I hold down the Alt button on a Mac that's also labeled the Option button, and I move this anchor, you notice it's now broken free of the other Bezier anchor, and I can move them independently of one another. Now I can take my subselection tool, move this point, and have a much more interesting effect on this shape now that I can move these Bezier anchors independently of one another. Let's go to actual pixels so we can see how that looks now. Alright, so that's a pretty interesting effect that we've created there. So that concludes this video. The subselection tool, remember, it only allows you to work with the points that define the shapes, and by manipulating the points and manipulating the Bezier anchors, you will therefore manipulate the vector paths that pass through those points. Hope you learned something. See you in the next video.